Hello and welcome to another Thursday interview here on Viking.TV with me, Ann Diamond. Now, at the end of this month, Viking welcomes yet another wonderful ship to its fleet, the amazing Viking Polaris. And so we also welcome and celebrate a godmother to that ship. And since it is an expedition ship, Polaris has, as its godmother, well, an extraordinary woman and somebody who has indeed explored the whole world, actually, North and South poles and almost everywhere in between. She is Ann Bancroft, the first woman ever in history to reach both poles. And I rather love this picture of her because it shows, well, just how determined her smile is, even though you can tell she's braving a very strong and freezing wind. And that is what she's all about. The mental toughness, she has told me, that gets you through the day and spurs you on to win. The tenacity and courage that define her character have earned Anne worldwide recognition as one of today's most influential role models for women particularly and girls. Indeed, her foundation has been set up with the vision that tells every girl and woman in the United States and probably elsewhere in the world, if they dare to dream that they can do it, they will have the support to make their dreams come true. She is absolutely a fitting godmother for Viking's new expedition ship, the Polaris. And indeed it is a beautiful, beautiful ship. The sister expedition ship, of course, to the Atlantics, which is already taking people to parts of the world they never dreamed they probably would ever see, taking voyagers to the Antarctic to learn, experience and explore. In rather more comfort, I would have thought, than Anne has ever endured during her previous expeditions to that part of the world. But if you go, you could very well meet her on board, and that would be a thrill. Now, we have met before, virtually, but for the benefit of those who haven't seen that very early episode here on Viking.TV, let's go right back to childhood and talk to Anne about what on earth inspired her to become an explorer. Hello and welcome, and it's lovely to see you again, Anne.
Thank you. It's good to see you too, Anne.
And congratulations on becoming godmother to what a fantastically exciting ship.
Oh, it's hard to find words to express how excited I am and how honored I am to be a godmother of this most beautiful ship in the fleet.
Of course, it's the most beautiful ship in the fleet, although they all are. Now, as I was saying, I mean, I've sort of summed up your career in just a few seconds, but you have spent your life in the snow, trudging away, reaching poles, reaching parts of the world that other people only see in picture books. Where did that inspiration come from? You've been doing it since you were a child.
You know, I've been so lucky. I grew up in a rural setting. And so in the old days, as they say, you know, adventure was right out the back door. And we didn't have a lot of neighbors. So my brothers and sisters and I headed out, and our imagination was so important to, you know, our sense of play and adventure. And then you sort of coupled that with my mother trying to keep me reading and keep me attentive in my classwork. And she would find books that were filled with adventure. And if she could, she'd find female characters in those books. But more often than not, because that was pretty hard to do, that was a hard order to fulfill, she found adventure books with animals. And I was hooked. And I just started thinking of those early explorers. And I wanted a piece of it when I was about 8 years old. I wanted to head to the far reaches of the globe.
What did your mother think of that? Maybe she'd inspired you too much.
Well, I think when I finally ventured off to the North Pole in 1986 as a young elementary school teacher, I don't think she really thought that all of my previous outdoor exploits in mountains and kayaks or wherever I was heading off were going to take me on the path that I am currently on. But she's been super supportive, and I'm so lucky that I grew up with parents. Both my mom and my dad did not clip my wings. They let me be the girl that I was and the woman I've become.
That is remarkable. I mean, we'll talk a bit later on about your foundation and the way you want to inspire other young women, particularly, to do the very things that your mother inspired you to do. But I guess also being able to roam through in the forests, in the snow with your brothers and sisters. I think we certainly saw a picture of you with your brother. Gives you a sense of, well, setting a target, a goal, and accomplishing it, but also coming up against challenges. Learning how to cope on your own, even as a child.
Well, I'm a stubborn person, and I was certainly a stubborn and determined kid. My mom said, she had a hard time even before I was walking, keeping me sort of contained in the yard. So I just headed out. And so, challenges and obstacles for me were just something to overcome. I don't know where that came from exactly, other than when I have a goal, I pursue it. And the key now, as an adult, is to learn to temper that so that you're not just willfully stubborn, and get yourself into all sorts of trouble. But you want to persevere, but you also want to sort of acknowledge where your shortcomings are and when it's time to back off. I think that's the explorer's biggest lesson to learn, is when to come off of something and recalibrate to start again and remake the plan, if you will.
Yeah, and that is actually life or death in the sort of situations you find yourself in. You've got to know when to say, we can't make it in time, we'll have to pull back because of the weather, because of the time of year or whatever. Have you ever had to pull out of something, take that sensible decision, no matter how hard it was?
Oh, absolutely. There's been several expeditions with Liv in the Arctic, one where she froze her feet and we had to come off, so it was quite obvious. But sometimes, you think, well, I can just, tough it out. But, we were older then, and I think a little bit wiser. And, the conversation was really about, at that point, you have a lot of life left to live, and it's not worth losing your toes over. When I first went to the South Pole in 1992-93, leading an all-women's team, our goal was actually to go across Antarctica. But when we got to the South Pole, the midway point, we didn't have the finances left to do it. In the early 90s, people did not believe women could or should be on the continent of Antarctica. And so sponsorship was just non-existent. And I made the really hard decision at that moment to turn around and bring my team off and stay as a group rather than splinter off and maybe pursue it myself with one other person and go fast and furious to the other end and then not know how to get off when we're on the Ross Ice Shelf. And that was a horribly hard decision. But I can tell you in retrospect, as many tears as I shed, I was lauded for making that decision when I got home. And my silver lining was that when I promised myself, if I ever could raise the money and launch this effort again, Antarctica will still be there. The silver lining, however, is that I met Liv Arnesen, and we've been working together for 22 years, and we're like sisters. She too is a godmother to Octantis, and so it's been a gift, So sometimes, when you're making those hard decisions, other wonderful bounty comes from that.
There you are with Liv, and as you say, it's been a very rewarding and long pairing. You're very funny together as well, aren't you? There's something about, you've obviously got a very similar sense of humour, and that's very important at times, isn't it?
Well, we have a sense of humor. I don't know if it's similar. I would think that sometimes she's a little tired of my sense of humor. There is a cultural difference, but we get along famously. We are like sisters. So even if we squabble, we make up pretty quickly, and there's just a tremendous amount of love and respect for each other. And that is born out of, a lot of travel together and a lot of commitment to making sure that regardless of everything that we come up against and opportunities, etc., that our friendship is the paramount element in all that we do.
Remind us, because as I said, there may be people who didn't watch our earlier episode, which was done way back at the beginning of Viking TV, actually, when we were all locked down. How did you find each other? I think the first move came from you, didn't it?
I finally found the gumption to launch the idea of the Traverse again about 7 years later. And the first person I called, or I wrote her a letter, it was still the time when you wrote letters. And I invited her, I sent her an airline ticket, and I invited her to come to the US, meet my base camp team, and try and convince her to cross Antarctica with this crazy American woman. And we didn't know each other. We knew of each other because women in the polar regions it was a small group at that time. It's grown quite a bit, but I'd like to see it get bigger. But so she was my first and my only choice. I sort of pretended that I had other interviews to do, but I wanted Liv Arnesen.
It's lucky you got on. Your characters just got on, but also, I mean, you said you sometimes squabble. I can't even think when you do that, because so much of your exploring work, particularly in these freezing conditions, you are one behind the other, just trudging through the snow, dragging sleds behind you for miles and miles and hours and hours. Yes, there are moments like the one we're seeing now, and there is one I think that's a Viking expedition off the Octantis, possibly.
It is this January.
Your Viking outfit. So there you are, skiing in rather more pleasant surroundings, I think. I must ask you, actually, what is that like to find now that you're godmother of a ship that's going to go to those very regions that you've loved? Yes, I mean, you say you love it, but has been such hard work, and you've had to endure such terrible conditions to get there. Suddenly you're going to be on a luxury ship experiencing the same thing. I mean, that must feel weird.
Well, it's pretty lovely, I have to say. The thread count and the food. And then you couple that with the scenery right out your bedroom window. There's nothing like it. I will just correct you ever so slightly in that for us, horrible conditions are something of a great joy and privilege. We love what we do. We've both dreamt about these places since we were young girls. We feel that they're extraordinary. And yes, sometimes the wind is foreboding, and you want to just crawl in your sleeping bag and never come out. But it's always a bright day, another day. And the privilege of being in this remarkable landscape is it just never escapes us. It's very different to go down the peninsula as we do on Octantis, and Polaris will travel that way too. I think what is so joyous is to be with all the guests and see their excitement. And actually, not just the guests, the crew is so excited to be there too. It is such an extraordinary place. I've never met one person in all of my travels there that hasn't fallen deeply in love with Antarctica. And it's not just the penguins, it's the extraordinary beauty. It's unique to the rest of the world, and it's such a gift. So to be able to bring people, as Viking is able to do, to this extraordinary place and share and allow for us to share that love and tell some of the stories of the internal part of the continent and the coastal regions is an absolute joy.
Does the air smell different? Is the air fresher? I don't know. Are there ways that you can describe it a little for us? Because the pictures are so breathtakingly beautiful, but I just can't imagine what it's like to be there.
Well, if you're around, 1,000 penguins, the air is not particularly lovely. But you're so happy to be there that you put up with it. It is clear. I mean, when you're on the deck of the ship and you're coming through the islands, it's fresh and wonderful. And you feel that if it's not too windy, that breeze on your cheeks, and you've got, your good gear on, and you don't want to go inside. It's hard to sometimes sleep on these ships because there's so much to see.
Yes,
and so much to experience.
Yeah. I know that, I mean, you started out as a teacher, didn't you? And I know with your foundation, you want to pass on these lessons. You want to describe, you want to inspire. When you're aboard, as you have been already on the Atlantis, when you're aboard and you're talking to people who are very curious, they want to know more, they want to learn, what do you tell them they should go see? What do you try and involve them in?
Oh, well, when we're on the ship, it's the hard part is really, trying to encourage everybody not to miss a thing, regardless of maybe how tired you might be and just you want to flop your head on the pillow, because there's always a good lecture. There's always some sort of content. And then just sitting on deck, having a frothy beer in the afternoon and looking out at icebergs with seals on them, and suddenly a whale breaches. And, our lecture, for instance, was interrupted by a pod of whales blowing. And so you just have to just take it all in. And it's absolutely glorious. It's hard to turn away from any one thing because it's all just a great adventure. There's so much.
We've got some pictures of you and Liv obviously getting stuck into delivering lectures and talks and taking questions whilst on board. But you're actually saying that in the middle of one of your lectures, somebody said, there's whales out there. I see whales. And off you had to go and have a look.
Well, the beauty is that this facility is so lovely. You just turn around and the ocean is behind us. Yeah. When we're giving this lecture, and it's so you're never far from the real show, which is where you're visiting. And I think that's true whether you're in Europe or on some of these ocean excursions. The Viking does such a wonderful job of letting the place that you're visiting be the top dog of the show. Mm. Even though the ships are so extraordinary.
Oh yeah, I mean they're just beautiful anyway, but where they're going is why you're there. And I guess the people on board as well are very committed. They've booked themselves at one of these early places on the expedition ships, and they're going to an extraordinary place, which means that they're probably already interested. They must be very hungry for the sort of knowledge that you can give.
Yeah, I think there's an enormous amount of curiosity in the clients that you serve, and you have to have a love of travel to commit to 10 days on a cruise surrounded by icebergs. So I think you already have a captive audience, and it's my experience has been one where there's always you're just being peppered with questions, and they want to hear your stories from the past. And they want to hear how you're seeing what you're seeing today and what that feels like. Many of the same questions you're asking me, the guests are asking us on deck as well.
Yeah, it's like how when you get to the South Pole, do you know that you're there? Or certainly when you get to the North Pole, how do you know you're there? That sort of thing. What happens to your compass when you get near a pole? Things like that. All the obvious questions that I've asked you before. But it proves, and we'll talk about your foundation now, but it proves that it's not education or knowledge isn't just for the young, is it?
Oh, it's not. I think I get more curious the older I get. There's more answers I want to seek out and more places I want to go. the hunger doesn't die. I think it increases. So and I always encourage any age person that I'm with is keep that wonderful childlike astonishment about this remarkable world. And life is, it'll always put a smile on your face if you have that kind of childlike attitude to everything you're experiencing.
I recently met some people who'd just been on the Octantis, and they just said it was spectacular. They had no idea it would be as exciting as it was. There you are. I put a little video played before, but I'd love to play it again for those who haven't seen it yet. Basically about you and Liv and your amazing accomplishments. Let's have a little look at this.
About 35 below.
And there you are. Both of you are godmothers now to these amazing ships. Has anyone explained the extraordinary duties you're going to have to perform? No, I'm joking. So there you are with Liv, enjoying Antarctica together, as you have done so many times. No, I know what I want to ask. Since we last spoke, which is almost 2 years ago, you were both explorers, astonishing explorers, and yet you were locked down, unable to go anywhere, let alone explore. What have you done since?
Well, our very first venture forward after 2 years of lockdown was Antarctica on the Octantis. So it was a wonderful sort of reunion in several ways. One is that we hadn't seen each other for the first time in over 2 decades. We hadn't gone that long with not seeing each other. And then we met, we're meeting in Antarctica. In fact, we took a picture of ourselves with the background of Cooverville Island, where we camped at one point after our crossing. We did a kayak trip, and there it was. And so we were constantly reminiscing and just enjoying being back in this region and being back together and starting to think about where we could go next.
And what did you decide? Where are you going to go next?
Right before COVID, we were getting ready to do 2 rivers in New Zealand. And these rivers are protected by giving them human rights. That's an indigenous way to protect these waterways. And so with a New Zealand friend of ours, a Maori woman, we were going to navigate these 2 rivers. And so it looks like we're going to pick that trip back up again this coming winter or summer. We're starting to plan.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Yes, I've heard of this before. I think in France, they've just given trees the same rights as human beings. It's a rather nice move, isn't it?
I think it's a brilliant move.
Yeah, love it. So let's talk about the Ann Bancroft Foundation. Why did you set it up? What are its aims? What does it do?
Well, I set it up, and we're in our 25th anniversary year as well, and so is Viking. 25 years ago, really because after going to the North and the South Poles and being the first woman to do such, I was sitting, or I like to say I was standing on a new platform, is sort of the way I phrase it. I had a new opportunity, sort of an elevated voice, if you will, and that was something I wanted to amplify. So what could I do with that platform beyond just continuing to do more expeditions? And I got together with a group of friends and colleagues and smarter people in the room than I, and we really felt like we should do something with girls in particular, particularly in their adolescent years. And we started around a dinner table just talking about our experiences. And when I was a young girl, our family moved off to Africa in the 60s, in the mid 60s. And it was unheard of for two parents to take four little kids to that continent and just uproot their lives. And it changed our lives. So the travel, to being in another culture, as an 8-year-old girl, I knew that there was a world out there and I wanted a part of it. And so the foundation really supports, through small grants, mini grants or micro grants, an opportunity for a girl to have an experience. Because our belief is that if you have an experience like I had when I was 8 and 9 and 10, it can change everything. It can give you a sense of community. It can help you find your voice and your confidence. It can bolster your courage, and it can change your view. It's much like traveling on a Viking cruise. It opens up a brand new world that you didn't know existed, or you didn't know much about. And so it's very simple. We serve young girls from the ages of 5 through high school, and we give them a small monetary grant to do something that their heart really desires at the moment. It's not necessarily a career choice because some of them are quite young, but it what they tell us when they're finished is, I made a friend, an adult other than my parents listened to me. I learned I could do something new. I could get out of my comfort zone. So it's very simple, but it's life-changing and very profound. And we've been around for 25 years, and we're talking to some of the girls we served in those early years who are now adults with careers and families, and they talk about how those experiences that they had with us, that we helped them provide, have changed their trajectory and given them the confidence to be the strong women that they are today.
Oh, there must be some wonderful stories. I mean, what does a 5, 6, or 7-year-old say to you that they want to do? I guess go into space or something. You can't fix that for them, can you?
I can't do it all, but they do have to do an activity that's closer to home. But they some want to go to camp. Some are want to do like a basketball camp or volleyball or dance. Other girls have started their own businesses. They wanted to try and do something for their neighborhood. Particularly, we saw a lot of that during the pandemic. So it's, some go to courses in robotics or in government. So they're finding things with the help of their mentors, opportunities within their communities or even outside of their community that they're interested in, and they sign up for it and we help fund it.
That must be so rewarding. And I'll bet they keep in touch with you as well, don't they?
Oh, we work hard to stay in touch with them. Some of them are a little bit transient, but we kind of, work hard to track them because we want to see how the impact is being measured. How does something this simple and direct have a lasting impact on their lives?
And haven't you also worked with Liv with something called Bancroft Arnesen Explore?
Bancroft Arnesen Explore is the two of us, and it's our brand of being educators outside of the four walls of a classroom. So all of our expeditions are dovetailed with a strong curriculum, and that curriculum changes from time to time. We were very young there. that curriculum changes. So it could be Dare to Dream curriculum. It could be a dialogue curriculum that we utilize so that kids learn to dialogue towards solutions, even though they don't all agree, something we could all use a little of. And so we have different curriculums depending upon where we're going in the world. And that's really what Bancroft Arnesen Explorer is all about.
Now, the New Zealand expedition one sounds as though that will be great stuff for you for doing that. And I know that when you were actually going across Antarctica, when you were going to the poles, you always took children with you, as it were, didn't you? They always followed your route. I mean, in many cases, you were actually talking to them, I think, were you? Or at least by laptop
It is difficult to talk to them directly, but we had 3 million children around the world follow us.
Wow.
And they were following through the curriculum in their classroom, or they were following online. And occasionally we could talk to them on the satellite phone, but it was quite difficult sitting in a tent at the bottom of the world. But when we could, we would do it. We would charge up our sat phone batteries with the sun and have a chat with a classroom here and there. But mostly they were interacting with our team back home and through the technology until we got home and started visiting schools.
You never quite know how many people that would inspire to go on to better things too. What about what you were saying earlier that back in you said the 90s, I think, that even back in the 90s, it was difficult to get any funding for women because it was seen that women really don't belong on the continent of Antarctica. It's probably far too dangerous for you women. And it was very, very difficult to get any sort of funding. Has it changed now?
Well, I will couch the answer by saying that it's always hard to find marketing dollars for any endeavor. It has changed a lot. It's been fun to mark North Pole, South Pole, Antarctic crossing, and have these punctuations throughout the last 3+ decades to be able to also see societal changes in the way women are viewed. So we're seeing women on the sporting fields now like no other time in history. I really feel like this is such an exciting time for women of all ages, really. But it has changed. There are young women dreaming and attempting various expeditions on Antarctica, from solo to other groups. You're seeing more women in science on the continent, for instance. At the bases, there didn't used to be a strong presence of women at all on the continent. And so there's been tremendous changes, and it's so exciting. There's more work to be done. There's more places to go where people think it's just not a possibility. I think what threw people in the early 90s, we were going to go to the South Pole and across Antarctica pulling 260-pound sleds. And that just when they looked at you and they saw that you were 5'4", I'm sorry, and I've got American measurements, but
no, I understand.
And were 125 pounds, they just could not put that together. And they would say, you need a dog or you need a man or something. And and it didn't matter that we had crossed Greenland or these other places. It was just really hard to get over the mythology of our attitudinal barriers. Much harder than the Antarctic ice or wind, is attitude.
You can't take dogs anymore, can you?
Nope.
They've made a rule that they don't like you to take in any animals that aren't, indigenous.
That's right. There's no dog. So, but these are people in suits and, in New York City that they don't know anything about Antarctica.
Yeah, and there were expeditions on which you did take dogs in the early days, and I know that you told me a lovely story of Sam. There was one particular dog that was special called Sam, wasn't there?
Yeah, he's my man.
Yeah. Oh, go and tell me the story of Sam again. Where did he come from?
Well, on the North Pole trip in 1986, we went to the North Pole across the ice by dog team. And I was the only woman. I traveled with 7 men and 49 male dogs. I never let anyone forget that. And so I was a bit of an outsider. I had a lovely team, and we're still friends today. I was just talking to two of the guys, but Sam was an outsider. We had picked him up in a village on one of the training trips, and that's Sam right there. Beautiful husky, and we caught him because he followed us out into the hinterland, and he wasn't going to survive by himself. And he's been pulling ever since. And we got on famously because the other dogs really didn't like him. He was an outsider to all of the teams, and I was sort of an outsider as the only woman. So I would sneak a little bit of my food at night and put it in my pocket and go out and sneak it to Sam. And when I needed a good cry, and was feeling a bit sorry for myself, I'd go to Sam and bury my frostbitten cheeks into his lovely coat. And he never, never gave away my secrets.
One of the other ways, I guess, you inspire people is the books that you've written. Any more books coming?
Well, I would have to be very disciplined, to be honest, but I do have more stories to tell. I think one of the books that I would love to write, and our publisher is trying to encourage, is, every expedition, there's so many stories that don't make the expedition book, and I call them side trips. It's the adventures of getting to where you're going. So, getting to Octantis, for instance, was an adventure for 2 days because of COVID and all the testing we had to do and the stresses and strains and the people and the characters you meet along the way before you ever get to the place where you're actually going to start your adventure. So Liv and I, and, we've had so many sort of side trip adventures attached to our adventures. And I would love to sort of illuminate some of them and the wonderful people that we've met along the way that we never could have planned for, and the places that we've seen. And
yeah. Do you take pictures a lot? I mean, nowadays it's very easy to take good quality pictures, isn't it? Just with your phones or whatever. Do you take a lot of pictures on your routes?
I do. When Liv and I went down the Ganges River for 2 months with our water team of women, I don't think I ever put my camera out of my hand. Every moment felt like a picture for those 2 months. So I love to take pictures. My father was a photographer, so I have a little bit of that implanted in me, I think.
You've just given me an idea for another episode for Viking TV. We'll have a look at some of those pictures. Great stuff. It's been lovely to meet you again. And I can't tell you how thrilled I am to hear that you were godmother. Well, both of you and Liv, are now godmothers of those remarkable ships. So shall we say goodbye for the moment, but only for the moment, and leave everyone here now watching with an idea of where Polaris could take you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Follow in the tradition of the great polar explorers, setting your sights on Antarctica with this fascinating 13-day itinerary. Your once-in-a-lifetime journey begins in Argentina's capital, Buenos Aires. Then it's on to Ushuaia, the southernmost city in the world. From here, you'll sail past legendary Cape Horn and cross the fabled Drake Passage as you head for the bottom of the world. Antarctica. This is nature at its most flawless. An immense wild land of extremes and rugged beauty. A place so remote it eluded discovery until just 2 centuries ago. Norwegian Liv Arnesen, the first man to the South Pole, described this place as a wonderful fairy tale in blue and white. In this extraordinary setting, you'll enjoy a week of enlightening, educational and deeply enriching experiences. Each one designed to help you better understand the intricate details of this fabled continent. A majestic ecosystem only a tiny fraction of the world's population will ever have the privilege to see. Your purpose-built Viking vessel is an ideal base from which to explore and learn. A floating classroom sharing the science behind the otherworldly environment you're exploring. The ships of Vikings sail with a range of vessels designed to explore from the sea, making it easy to investigate these stunning landscapes. As you travel these dramatic waters, your nature-based schedule will be optimized to take advantage of weather and, most importantly, wildlife viewing opportunities. You have a front row seat in nature's greatest theatre when Antarctica's locals decide to put on their display. And of course, in the spirit of discovery, you'll spend significant time on the continent's unspoiled shores, examining the extreme geology with expedition leaders. An exploration of Antarctica with Viking is an illuminating, rewarding journey. A profound, thought-provoking immersion into this remarkable place. An unforgettable adventure where you are sure to be humbled by nature. Your expedition concludes in Ushuaia, Argentina, the world's southernmost city, where you'll board your flight for a return to Buenos Aires.